And this is absolutely by far my favorite topic. Why? Because this is the topic that I wind up getting emails over the last few years where people call me or they send me an email and they say, Dan, you know, I wound up using what I learned in the course and I saved someone's life. But more important than you're going to save someone's life in your office, it's also that you may wind up saving someone's life in your home, because that's where most medical emergencies occur, in your home or in your practice. You hope not in your practice. So I can tell you that I have received many emails on that regard, and I'll tell you about one friend of mine, whose name is Harvey, who has come to this course 6 times with his wife, who's his office manager. He's come to this course 6 times. You might say to yourself, maybe he's got a problem learning. But no, the truth is that he is very, very excellent at learning everything here, and what he does is he transmits all the information to his staff. So everyone, I go to his office, we go out to dinner, and I get there at like 4:45, and we're going out to dinner at 5. It's one of the few people in Queens that actually close at 5 o'clock. I know in Manhattan everyone closes at 5, but in Queens they stay open until 8, okay? So he leaves at 5, and he says to me, Danny, do me a favor, while you're waiting here, he says, do you mind asking anyone in my office, any of the staff, what they would do for any emergency? And I said, Harvey, come on, that's I don't want to embarrass them. He says, no, go ahead. So I said, okay. So I said, anyone? And he says, anyone. So that means the receptionist, the person that's doing the sterilization, and or his hygienist, and or his people that are assisting in the back. And I go over to them and I say, okay, what do you do for anaphylactic reaction? What do you do for an asthma attack? What do you do for syncope? And you know what? Every single one in his office on staff knows what to do for every single emergency. And I said to him, Harvey, it is extraordinary that you do this. I don't know any practice that does it. This is great. And he has mock emergencies every 3 months. Okay, and I'll tell you when to do mock emergencies, because it's the #1 thing you're going to be asked if you ever have a problem. So you do mock emergencies, doctor? Okay, so you really have to do those. He says, Danny, I do this because what happens if I'm the one that has the emergency? That's #1. And #2, he says to me, Danny, I do this because I know when I have an emergency, I'm going to freeze. And guess what? We all freeze. Nobody handles an emergency exactly the way the algorithm says to handle it in the time that the emergency occurs. It's not like you have the chart in front of you, A, B, C, D, E, what to do when that emergency happens. You're in the middle of a day, you've got patients lined up, you've got people waiting, and all of a sudden, boom, this patient is now unconscious in front of you. And what are you going to do? Your adrenaline starts rushing, you wind up hypertensive, you start sweating, it becomes a very, very nerve-wracking thing. I'm sure that everyone in this room has had a patient faint over the course of their practice, am I correct? And you recall when that happened, that it's pretty nerve-wracking to us. So one of the things that I like to do in this course is try to make this so that it becomes rote, so that it becomes automatic for you. And one of the ways to do that is with color coding. So I have color-coded cards, which I brought with me, which I'll hand out to everyone before lunch. Remind me if I don't. And each color represents an emergency, and there's a reason why the colors represent the emergencies, and you'll see this as we get into it today. And in the heat of battle, when an emergency occurs, you may not remember exactly what to do for all the steps for an anaphylactic reaction or for an asthmatic attack that's not doing well, but you'll remember the color. And you'll see why you remember the color. There's specific reasons for it. And I had a person just 3 weeks ago that I worked with for 30 years who called me up and said, Dan, I had this patient, he had an emergency, we'll describe it later, but he couldn't remember the algorithm, but he remembered just blue. Because blue is the sky, and the sky has air. So anything to do with the respiratory emergency, breathing, is the blue card. So he said, all I remembered was blue. I went to my emergency kit, I took out the blue card, and I just followed it, and everything went smooth and perfect. But he said, if I had to remember it, because when you're into that, when you have that adrenaline rush, it's hard to remember. It's hard to really think straight. For everybody, not just, you think it, unless you're an emergency room physician. If you're an emergency room physician or you're an EMT, and this is another thing I'll tell you I'd like to share with you. Since I stopped working 5 years ago, I've been involved with half a dozen EMTs, and I've worked with them carefully. And they're the ones that teach me a lot of what I'm going to show you today. Because you could go to all the dental courses